Welcome back, everybody, to the Birdies and Bourbon Show. We're excited to have Lindsay Hoopes from Hoopes Vineyard on today. Lindsay, cheers.
Cheers. I know, where's my glass?
Oh, no, we're going to have to pause this. Where's your glass at?
It's okay. I'm looking at a sea of inventory. I'm good.
Now you're really, not only are you making us jealous with, and I'm sure we want to keep this fun and entertaining, so we won't get too much on what's happening there. You've already turned it into fun, and what looks like is going to be taken. I can't say lemons, but you're going to take smoky grapes and turn them into smoky brandy. How much fun is that going to be?
You know, honestly, I think it's already been an amazingly fun process. Obviously, it started in 2017 when I sort of explored every option I could think of to find some way to monetize our crop, because obviously as farmers, when we lose an entire vintage, we lose an entire year of revenue. So the unfun part was that whole process of running into a million dead ends and, you know, ending up with something that we couldn't drink, that we couldn't sell, that we couldn't enjoy. So
Sure.
I've actually been having a ton of fun with Marianne in literally turning something that I thought was a total loss into something that I am beyond excited about, not just because it's a solution, but because it's actually been amazing to innovate with somebody as creative as she is. And by she, you know, obviously Marianne Eaves, but you know, actually create something beautiful out of a total loss, which, you know, I didn't know if it was possible, but it's fun. So while everybody else is struggling a good bit, I'm actually having fun, which is terrible to say, but I think, you know, there is some beauty to solving a problem that actually might help all of my neighbors as well. So I'm very excited about the opportunity here to reinvent and to pivot like we've all been doing during COVID, but even more so in the Valley during the fires. So,
yeah, absolutely. So hold on. So we've jumped right into things, and that's great. There's a lot of stuff that we're going to unpack that you just said. But by the way, that was a great. So Dan and I were wondering what the agenda was going to be, and you just gave it to us. So it's going to be a great show. So hold on.
According to duty.
Hey, checks in the mail. So we do like to open up with something kind of, I don't know, fun, or I don't know, maybe not different. I've been definitely been looking at your Instagram page, and is it the Oasis at Hoopes, or the Hoopes Oasis, or?
Yeah, the Oasis by Hoopes. I'm actually there right now. So.
Okay, awesome. Well, so I'm gonna back away from there just for a second, and you're inviting me. Do you live on property?
I do.
Okay, so you're inviting, not me, but let's say you're inviting some friends over to the house, right? And these are new friends that have never been over to the house, and you're like, hey, come over, have dinner with me and my family. What are you serving us?
Well, usually it's definitely going to be something that we pick in the garden, because we do a lot of seasonal farming. We have an organic garden year round. And so most likely, I love seeing the farm to table transformation. That was a dream of mine. And so when we put the garden in, I'm finally able to cook literally from the garden all year round. So it's definitely going to be that. But my husband is Indian. And in recent years, I've been learning a lot about cooking Indian food. So I might surprise you and do something with a lot of spices that everyone says does not pair with Napa wine. And I disagree. So I'm going to blow your mind. Yeah, so I'm going to blow your mind with a pairing of super spicy Indian food made from fresh organic produce from the garden and paired with bomb-ass wine from Napa in an experience you didn't think you could have. That's dinner.
Awesome. So what time and what day?
Yesterday.
Right. Oh, I hope that wasn't a uninvitation.
No, not at all.
So let's. So for the people that are listening that can't see us, so we're doing this kind of a funky way, but it's working out. So I've got the Hoopes 2014 Cabernet. Dan has the Merlot, which I did sample the Merlot. I hope this is not sacrilegious, but do you use one of these at all, or it's
No, I think they're amazing.
Okay, so I'm holding up and we don't like to give free advertisements, but just for conversation's sake, I'm holding up a Coravin pin. So Lindsay was nice enough to share a few bottles of wine, and we're kind of working through them. And Dan and I are not in the same city, so I'm like, okay, I'm going to taste the Merlot because I'm a cab guy, and I'm gonna make Dan drink the Merlot. And I'm like, I taste the Merlot, and I'm like, shit. that was that I and so and there's that it's all great juice. But Merlot, if you will, over the years, right, it's kind of taken a back seat to cab for sure. I would say, just in the public's eye or in the drinker's eye. That Merlot, and I guess it's also kind of a palate thing, right? And it's kind of what do you like and what do you do? As you can see, I got some whiskeys and scotches and stuff behind me, but that Merlot is absolutely amazing. I'm like, I want a steak as big, thick, juicy, and kind of as rare as I can get that thing. But yeah, the Merlot I thought was fantastic. So Dan's having the Merlot, I'm having the 2014 Cabernet, and then we may get into, depending on when Lindsay hangs up on us or not, we may get into the Rosé. I haven't gotten into that one yet. But so I guess let me ask you this one. Is there a particular reason that you sent these bottles, or was it just like let's send them three randoms?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, the reality is that your statement about Merlot is probably the industry understatement of the year. Merlot has been massacred by the media, by public interest, I mean, you name it. Everybody says Merlot, and it's almost a four-letter word these days. Not understanding that Merlot is one of the most important grapes in France, but because they don't call the wines Merlot, people drink them nonstop but refuse to buy a Merlot from California. And the movie Sideways did the poor varietal absolutely no justice.
Right.
But the irony in that movie that most people who aren't really into wine don't get is that the protagonist actually likes Merlot. It's his favorite wine, but it reminds him of his ex-wife. And, you know, we don't need to beg the question, but I'm sure some people can understand that, you know, the love-hate relationship there. And so at the end of the movie, his favorite bottle of wine is actually a Merlot that he's drinking out of the plastic cup or whatever it was. So anyway, I feel so badly because it actually revolutionized the industry, even though it was actually an inside joke. so I sent it because I feel like it's a redheaded stepchild and so undeserved, because it is a fabulous wine and it's now become a unicorn. It's hard to find in Napa. And the rosé, I sent it to you all because everyone thinks it's a porch pounder, something that ladies drink maybe because it's pink. I know that was sort of my dad's opinion for a while, not a gender thing, but just, you know, I don't know. He didn't feel like it looked or presented like a bold cab, but actually that's a rosé of Cabernet. And in my mind, it's a very interesting take on the rosé industry because Napa is known for Cabernet, and you can make rosé out of any grape. So this is really a rosé for Cabernet drinkers, red wine drinkers, and it's amazing to pair with food. Like I said, that Indian dinner, I might be serving it, but also if you look at, you know, rosé is actually probably the best wine to serve with Thanksgiving dinner because it works really well with that sweet, savory, doesn't overwhelm the turkey. And so it's a really underappreciated wine for the fact that it can be sophisticated, it can be really nuanced, it can be drunk all year and actually paired with food. So I'm trying to change everybody's conceptions about what wine is and what you should be or shouldn't be drinking. I think there's a lot more to it. And wine can be brandy too. Isn't that the theme?
That's I mean, fair enough. Yeah. And again, so thanks to Marianne Eaves for, I guess, connecting us, or at least giving us an opportunity to introduce ourselves to you. And again, thank you for coming on the show. So, yeah, I mean, listen, the cab is fantastic. I haven't said this in years. I would actually, me personally, for my palate, I would go for the Merlot. We'll crack into the rosé in a few minutes, but Yeah, I want to get into, well, before we get into the brandy piece, why don't you share? I'm sure you've shared it dozens of times. I can see the passion. We've read up on the story, so we kind of know some background about you. I don't know if our listeners do yet, but why don't you give us kind of give us the hoop story that you'd like to give Birdies and Bourbon? So yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting into this brandy conversation. And so for those of you that don't know, and this may be a repeat of what Lindsay's going to tell us, but I'm sure everybody's up to date on kind of the current events of the wildfires that are happening in California, and it's not just in Northern California, and it's not just this year. I think this happened in 17 was probably the most significant outside of 2020. But I mean, it's like, hey, it's wintertime and it's going to snow in Boston, right? I mean, they're gonna get fires out there. So typically when this happens, and you've already seen a lot of wineries and winemakers that said, hey, we're just not going to have a 2020 release, and they're going to can them. So Lindsay, being a trailblazer, and how do we work this out? Which I don't know if we got on the Marianne show, Dan, how she met Marianne, but she's taken the smoky grapes and she's actually going to make brandy from the grapes, and it's going to be a smoky brandy. So that's one piece that we're going to cover with her. The next piece that we're going to cover with her is it looks like they've been doing a lot of vermouthing out there. I don't know if that's actually a word or a verb. She's definitely more educated than I am, so she can give us an English lesson on that. Or if Martha Hudson's listening, she can. Hey, Lindsay, it looks like you're on.
Thank you. So sorry about that.
No worries. No, we're good.
We're in the country, so every once in a while.
I'm from the country, and I've got a bottle. I got about 2 more glasses in there, so I'm good for at least 22 minutes.
All right, sounds good. So what did I miss?
Well, you didn't. So I kind of gave a breakdown. I did a little, not that, I mean, it's like you're living under a rock if you don't know the wildfires are happening. So I touched on the wildfires, and I said like 2020 is probably one of the worst years that we've had. I think 17 was the outside of 2017 was the last worst fire year that you had, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and
yeah, they were different.
Yeah, right. And every year you get fires. But before we get into that, if you want to share a story, not a story, but if you want to tell a little bit about the hoop story, and you can keep it as condensed or as long-winded as you like, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, the Hoopes story is really, I guess I'm a Hoopes, obviously, second generation proprietor. I took over the family business about 8 years ago from my father, but it was not the most obvious trajectory. Really, definitely not the most obvious career choice. So my dad was a farmer, and he basically sold wine grapes to other people for most of his career, or most of his career in Napa. And I absolutely hated farming at the time. I thought it was the most incredibly boring community. It was agriculture. I kept teasing him as to why he wanted me to be so educated if I was just going to come back and be a farmer. I mean, I was, maybe a recalcitrant high school student, perhaps. And I'm sure, I've completely changed my perspective now, but I couldn't wait to get out of Napa growing up, and Napa's changed so unbelievably since I grew up here. People always ask, what was it like to grow up in Napa? And I was like, we have a Hells Angels biker bar and 81 people and a veterans home. I mean, it was not the lap of luxury that people think of today. And I miss that Napa in so many ways, because it was, it is still very truly at its heart and soul an agricultural community, but everyone lived that life. Everyone kind of had that goal. So, it was a cool childhood, but of course, when you're in it, I didn't appreciate it. And so I did everything I could to leave, including, throwing a party that got me kicked out of home, ultimately, and sent to boarding school. So I decided that I was never coming home, and I picked a boarding school that was as far away from possible as possible from California, and that ended up being in Massachusetts. So I moved all the way across country. If I'd known at the time they had international boarding schools, I might have decided to go there. But lo and behold, I ended up, learning that my dad, because he had become so well known for the quality of his farming, was actually asked in 1999 whether or not somebody could use his name on their label to pay homage. And a significant part was that he actually was the reason that Napa was largely saved during the phylloxera outbreak. So for those non-wine drinkers here, phylloxera is a disease. It's a root louse or bug that basically gets into the roots of the vine and destroys the entire vine. So the only way to recover from it is to replant. And Napa experienced a pandemic, not unsimilar to what we're doing now, that froze the industry. And we had the only vineyards that survived in their entirety. And so we were selling grapes to a number of other people so that we could maintain a Napa wine industry during this pandemic. And so not like it's kind of like what we're doing now. This is my own twist to it, where we've got, this big problem that's affecting all of us. And he just, had a solution. Now, if my dad were giving this speech, I guess, he would say that he was smart. I would say that he was lucky, obviously. I mean, we were at a time where it was early in the wine industry in Napa. There was always a wine industry in California, but it was early in terms of Napa's international acclaim, and there weren't a lot of rootstocks. There weren't a lot of disease-resistant plants. So, he was lucky in a lot of ways because disease hits us, and sometimes you have
you have to put yourself in a position to get lucky.
I agree. It's true. And he was incredibly lucky. I mean, he had a lot of insight. When he got to Napa, he didn't know anything about wine. We were the 42nd winery in Napa. We've got, we planted in an area which is now Oakville, but the town of Yountville didn't exist. Oakville didn't exist. And now it's become the most famous wine growing region in the world. So, he moved to a place that everyone said was the other side of the tracks. Sure. I'm not even kidding you. Mm-hmm. And he had to ask, what should I plant? And people are like, well, we think something's going to catch on with this wine thing. So, he had some insight. He did it. He took the risk.
Yeah. A gambler, I guess, right? And not so dissimilar to yourself and where we're going to wind up with this conversation and what you're doing. So I didn't mean to redirect us, but I'm just like, I'm hearing the similarities between the two of you. And like, and you know what, that's the other thing is, think about it. It's anybody that's really made a change in, and I wouldn't even say a change in an industry, but anybody that's kind of done something that's like, holy shit, that actually worked. You took it was a risk. It was a chance. It was like, damn, hey, I thought that was dumb, but I guess it wasn't that dumb after all,
Well, you're dead right. That's the thing about any of these decisions is they're expensive. They take time. They take a lot of courage, I have to say, because for example, in my situation, I'm looking at a $2 million loss, and I've already lost an entire year's worth of revenue, but I've sunk a ton of cost into it. And only an absolute, crazy person would throw more money at that problem, right? It's like, you got to know when to cut your losses, or do you? You have to follow your instinct. You have to be brave, and you're not going to succeed all the time. So, on the one hand, you gotta try things and be willing to make mistakes, but you've got to try things because that's how innovation comes to be. That's how it works.
All right, so
we don't get anywhere by doing the same old thing.
Yeah, so you led me far enough down the road. I want to get into it. I can't resist. So the first one is, so how did you get hooked up with Marianne? It may not have come through.
Yeah, no, it did. Honestly, it was a total chance encounter in a lot of ways. I was featured in a book called Women in Wine Country, and we were doing a media junket down in Kentucky. And it was actually my first trip ever to Kentucky. I had become in recent years I would say a Scotch enthusiast. I lived in Ireland for a long time. And then that led me to, I loved peatier, whiskeys that, led me to Scotland. And anyway, so I was going into Kentucky to feature this book, and it was basically around the time I found out that we were going to be unable to sell our product. We had made ultra premium wine, and it tasted like an ashtray, and we'd been throwing money at it for 2 years. And so it was exactly that same month I went, on this book junket, and we had a winemaker dinner together. She was talking about the gin that she made for Castle and Key. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting across the table from her talking about our family wines. And I joked, I was like, you know what? I love Scotch. And I love wine. And there has got to be some way to put these two things together. I just don't believe that ash or smoke is going to be a negative thing for this somehow. And so, her eyes kind of lit up, and she's like, I've never made brandy. I mean, in all honesty, I don't even think I'd ever realized. I knew that brandy was made from wine, but I don't even think I saw that as. I didn't even think about it.
All brandy is fruit, right? So for the people listening, think about, so the difference between moonshine and brandy is with moonshine, you use corn and sugar, and with brandy, you use fruit and sugar, right? Essentially.
Yeah. And actually, and brandy, is mostly made from grapes, as is cognac.
Yeah.
Or it's made from wine, I should say.
Right.
So it's actually fermented into wine first and then converted, whereas grapes can be the base for, anything, gin, vodka, whatever. But if it's actually wine first, it's brandy or some fermented juice.
Yeah. So is there a, are you, so in the, so we don't need to get it too nerdy on the process unless you want to, we can, but so you've got, I don't know, how many barrels you're working with? Like, are you working with a full year's crop?
I'm sorry, do we consider ourselves craft? Are we producing craft? I missed your
No.
comment.
Sorry. I was asking, so how many barrels, or what's the stock look like? Is it a full year's crop that you're turning into the brandy?
Oh, yeah, it's going to be extraordinarily limited. So we produced a significant, I should say that the distillation process reduces the volume substantially. It turned into about 15%. So in 2017, 50% of my harvest was affected. And of that, now we only have 15% that we've converted into brandy. So super rare, super small quantity. And then obviously every year that we make it, it sort of depends on what was affected by the fire, right? So every year it's going to be a bit of a grab bag as far as how much we can produce.
Yeah, kind of small batch brandy, I guess, right?
Yeah, very small batch, and very it's made into premium wine first. So it goes through, essentially the bottles that you have in front of you, that would be the product before we even distill it, and then we age it another 2 years. So you lose, in every process you lose some volume. So super craft.
So we got to figure out how we get on the list for a bottle to have you back on the show to review the brandy.
I know somebody.
That's a perfect answer.
Yeah, that is a really good answer. So that's completely different, right? I don't. And I know it's a tight-knit community out there. People are like, oh, that vineyard and this vineyard, and you don't want to mention names, but it's kind of an incestual community of people living in the same neighborhood, doing the same thing, if you will. But I'm thinking like a Madura, right? So, or some more fortified wines is kind of where you go down that road. So it's kind of been done, but it's been done with, I don't know what the proper term is, but it's been done with clean grapes. And I would say, I don't want to use the word tainted, but you're using grapes that other vineyards wouldn't see. They wouldn't meet the quality standards to go into a premium wine.
Really? I
know.
There she's already back.
Already back. Yeah.
Okay,
Hey, sorry about that, but yeah.
Where did I lose you?
So let's go back to So let's start at the comment that I made talking about, I didn't want to say tainted, and then you're getting into tainted's okay, and because you're making premium wine, et cetera.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess the whole point is that taint does, as you point out, have a negative connotation. But what I'm trying to emphasize is that everyone here starts making wine in the vineyard, and we only grow grapes for wine, right? And so, an ultra premium wine at that, because Napa is a premier wine growing region. It's one of the best recognized for quality, specifically, and smoke does not correlate with what people consider a quality paradigm or requirement for ultra premium wine. But I don't think smoke, and in fact, we know smoke can have a beautiful impact on products in the spirits world to the point where people actually try to recreate it. They do it at the initial stage in Scotch. They do it, they try to impart smoky characteristics through barreling and actual processes that are undertaken in production. So smoke isn't a taint. In fact, it's a coveted asset of a lot of spirits. So that's kind of where the innovation comes in.
Yeah, I mean, think about, you can go to, I can start naming restaurants in San Francisco, well, even Napa, and I can go and pay $30 for a smoked Manhattan that they're putting wood chips in and a smoker. And they're like, they're infusing smoke into my drink in front of me, and I'm begging for that, right? And I want it, and I'm going to pay extra for it. And again, I get, and that's where I was kind of going, right? Is, people are, it's smoky and it's tainted. And it's like, well, I think what you're doing is, I don't know, revolutionary probably doesn't even explain it. And I'm going somewhere with this, but it's really, how many millions of tons of grapes have been just like, chuck it out the window and you've just lost, everything, right? Literally. Instead of like, hey, what do we do with these? And it's probably, if you're using it to feed animals and such, but maybe not a loss, but definitely not in the avenue where you're selling wine out of it. But I guess where I'm kind of going with this, hoping to get us off track, is so Napa specifically. There's one winery out there that people are like, really. Anyway. Are your partners and colleagues out there, are they looking at you like, what in the hell is this lady doing? Or
is it Field of Dreams, or are they on board? Yeah.
Or are they like, oh my God, I can't believe she's doing this, and they're going to produce this product out of Napa. Like, you got to shut that off. We're known for one thing.
Yeah.
No, I actually think that a lot of people are wondering why. I don't want to say we're the first to think of it, because you just never know. But it's not that easy to pivot to some extent.
Yeah.
So I will say that, you have to have a distiller or know what you're doing. You have to be able to find a distillery to distill the facility, because, the equipment is completely different. Right.
Sure.
So conceptually, it's like, if you know how to make wine, it doesn't mean you know how to make a spirit, even if it's sort of the same thing. Right. When you start. So, there's that. You have to be resourceful and look to find those things. And that's where I would say a lot of people maybe just weren't looking outside their box. But I think we all have seen industries where they keep doing the things that they're doing because it works. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're looking at all of the opportunities that are right in front of their face. And sometimes, how many times have we all sat around and gone like, why didn't I think of that? Or like, why didn't I do that? Or I did think about it, but I never told anyone. And I was on, I just like went to bed and didn't do anything about it. I was at a place where I just didn't feel like I had that choice. I'm not going to I can't even throw alcohol away. I have to pay to get rid of it. So I'm not going to throw it away. And I'm going to find a solution because I have to support my family. Yeah. So I just wasn't going to let it go.
Yeah, a hell of an idea. I don't know if I read, or I think I read it, but you made a statement, and I didn't pay attention to the year. It's irrelevant to me. But you made a statement, and somebody asked you like, "Hey, what are you doing different in the industry?" And you're like, I'm paraphrasing again. So you said you want to bring wine to a different age group, if that's a fair statement. You're like, well, we got young people and we've got mature people, and I'm kind of in the middle. And how do I start to bridge that gap? And how do I diversify, our not just your brand, but the industry and the distillate specifically, or the wine specifically? How do you push that across, multiple genres? And I mean, I think this is an absolutely fantastic idea. We're rooting you on 100%. Yeah. And I think it works, man. I think it's really cool. Right. And I think it's another way, because you probably got a lot of people that are drinking that, I'm a wine drinker and I don't drink alcohol. I don't drink, hard booze. And I mean, what a great segue, a segue or a bridge into, hey, well, it's really just wine. It's just a little higher proof. I mean, let me kind of go down this road with you.
Yeah, like the gateway drug, as we used to use in my old profession, right?
Nice.
That's what I said about this needle. I'm like, I've never, I'm not a user, but I feel like when I shove it in there, I'm like going, I don't know, this is kind of weird to me.
So Lindsay,
it works.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask you. So, and this is for specifically right now. You're working on the 2017 vintage, is what you guys are working on now.
Well, generally speaking, so we are finishing the 2017 vintage because I made the wine. So that was a 2-year process. Mm-hmm. And that's when we made the decision that we had to pivot.
Okay.
And I don't think that the 2020, we're also working on the 2020 simultaneously because we had harvest right in the last couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. But we're looking at the 2020 harvest with an eye to make the brandy from the beginning, if you will, because we already know that it's not going to be suitable for wine production. And I didn't know that in 2017, but I know that today. So.
Okay.
So you're starting out. Yeah, you're going to be able to start from the foundation versus, hey, I've already got something, and now we need to fortify after the fact. Versus, let's go ahead and distill in the beginning. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I'm already asking for 2 bottles because
here we go again.
But I'm saying it's going to be really cool to take a look at. So you took something that was not satisfactory, and you couldn't do anything with it, and now you're gonna kind of you're gonna push that into a good drinkable product, and now you're gonna start the process with another premium good drinkable product. So it's going to be interesting to see what's the flavor profiles, and did it really change? Because, I mean, no kidding, man. I mean, this is very seriously, this is maybe an industry-saving solution that you've come up with. Because, I mean, I've already seen, and we don't need to go through the names of the wineries, but, I mean, there are a lot of wineries that already said, hey, we're not going to have a 2020 vintage.
Yeah.
Right. And they're not looking for. So, now I'm kind of scratching my head and I'm going, well, shit, are these think about all the craft distilleries, craft breweries. I mean, are they like, hey, I'll take your grapes, right? I mean, you don't pay to get rid of them. I'll take them I'll pay to come and get them. And it costs you nothing. And then what do you turn that into? And I mean, it's endless, right?
Well, and I've actually gotten a ton of calls in the last couple of days. Mm-hmm. We had basically our first media push with the LA Times and Food and Wine because they got wind that we were doing this. And I've had growers call me from all over the valley saying, some pretty sad stories of you're giving us hope because we had no insurance. We have no idea what to do. Can you help? And I love that because for the last however many years that I've been in Napa, one of the things that I've really been advocating for is to save the family farms and, make this industry viable for these families that really rely on it. Napa is a luxury destination, but it's not made up of all, billionaires by any stretch of the imagination. It's made up of a lot of small artisanal farmers that happen to be in a fabulous location. But, I hope that this actually is industry saving at a minimum for the small families that when they run into this issue, they are literally SOL from a revenue perspective. And so hopefully this will be a profit share opportunity, something that we can come up with that they don't suffer a total loss. And I'll tell you, insurance companies are, I mean, not even insuring people's homes anymore here.
Wow.
So, we want to keep people here. We want to keep Napa producing the premium quality stuff. And you have to give people a lifeline if Mother Nature is putting a stop. And, the government can only do so much. We have to help each other. It's a community. So it is incestuous, but a community has to rise together. And this is one really cool way for us to gather together to say, it might not be the ideal solution, but at least we can help each other get through this harvest.
Yeah, well, I mean, most of us experience Napa regularly, virtually, right? And when I say virtually, it's in the form of a glass, right, and something I bought from from your area. But
feels tangible to me, but
I bet it does. Yeah. Well, so so the thing is, like, it's. I mean, I've been to Napa several times. Dan's been a lot more than I have. And, I guess, if you're, most when you're going, it's vacation, right? It's fun. You're having a good time and everything's great. And then when you leave, you're still drunk and you're hungover. So you're still having a good time. Right. But what we don't see behind the scenes is, the work that yourself and everyone else, right? I mean, all your neighbors and partners, et cetera, are putting in to make it that destination to show up to. So, this, again, I'll get off this soapbox in a minute, but I think it's amazing that has it been done? I don't know. It probably has. It's just, do we want to do that? I mean, why would you? You don't have to do that because you're Napa and everybody wants your wine. You don't have to go down that road. But now, again, it's out of necessity. And I think it's a hell of an idea. Yeah.
Well, but that's all how you think about it, right? Like when you say Napa doesn't have to do it. I mean, look at cognac, right? Why is cognac unique? Napa has that same ability. I remember one of the biggest lessons I learned, with all this scuffle with my dad about farming. When I came back to apply for my job, if you will, because all of a sudden he's making wine. So it's now a sexy job, of course. I'm in college. It's like, okay, cool. So I rush home and I report to duty and my dad's like, why the hell would I hire you? You have zero work experience and you made the biggest mistake. You said it wasn't about farming. Well, yeah. Well, that's what I said. I was like, nepotism. You need me. I was like, no, I don't. So, I mean, he was in the military. He knows better than that. But I tried. So, but what was interesting about that was that, farming was ultimately the most important job. And what he said to me was, in order to make great wine, you have to grow good grapes. And I'm sure you've heard that every minute that you were in the Napa Valley. But there's a reality to the fact that what you put into the product actually correlates to the quality of the output, right? I mean, it seems obvious, but for whatever reason, it might not be clear. So with smoke taint, what's interesting is smoke taint doesn't undo the quality of what you put into the still, because the grapes themselves are still ultra premium quality. They're still grown under the best conditions with the care that you would put in for ultra premium grapes. So all hand harvested and all of those things that make great wine. So the input is actually prime for an ultra premium spirit. And that's how I like to think of it because, when you think about cognac, yeah, it's grapes, but it's grapes from a region. Why is that important? It's because of how they handle them, because of the type of grape that goes into it. So, I actually think that Napa is probably the prime destination for creating this new category. In my mind, very inventive. And you hear stories right now around COVID of people shifting and, making hand sanitizer. That's not what this is. Like, you could make a far less expensive product and, not invest the time, the money, the energy. Marianne and I would never have put our names to a product that we were not beyond excited about. And I say that because we've declassified the wines, right? If I just wanted my name on a bottle, I would have turned it into wine. And 25% of the population wouldn't have known it was smoke tainted because people can't tell.
Well, think about, so I'm going to go back to the Merlot. Sorry to cut you off, but I'm going to go to the Merlot. And, when I'm looking for something, I mean, like I like, I love Pinot, but I like Pinot from SLC, right? Or SLH, I'm sorry, right? So not the area, the region, right? I mean, I'm like, most
winery.
people, Yeah, most people that are drinking, no, the region.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like most people that are drinking Pinot, I mean, it's like they want it like grape juice, and like that's not what Pinot should be to me. I mean, Pinot should be like a good, bold, nice, sturdy, earthy, and like so the Merlot that I tasted, the Hoopes Merlot. I
Hmm.
mean, that thing is like really. I mean, it stands up, man. I mean, that's a thick, beefy like wine. I mean, it's earthy, it's smoky. I mean, I'm getting everything that we're talking about, and I'm like. I mean, I get it that it's a different smoke, but it's still that earthy smokiness, leather cigar.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it's, I think that the wine kind of resembles that in itself, alone.
Yeah. Cal sent me this Merlot, Lindsay, and I'll tell you, it is fantastic. I'm getting that leathery type like he's talking about as well. Now, this is Howell Mountain. Do you guys produce this every year under normal conditions? Are you guys doing the same kind of Merlot from there?
So we actually do grow Merlot in various places of the valley, but the
Mhm.
history of the Howell Mountain Merlot is that our winemaker at the time, when we thought about doing a Merlot, she loves mountain Merlot, and we don't actually own any hillside vineyard.
Mhm.
And so we ended up contracting for that specific fruit to make that wine, because what I want to do always is tell a story through our wine. And as we added our winemaker onto the team, basically telling her story was important as well. And she felt revolutionized and kind of inspired by mountain Merlot fruit. So that's why we sought out to find it. But, most of our story as a family is rooted in Cabernet, because we live in Cabernet. Like, we live on the valley floor. Most of our vineyards are down in Oakville, which is, in my opinion, definitely the best place to grow Cabernet. And so I don't think it's right to grow Pinot, for example, which is, as Cal mentioned, it's a fabulous grape. It's one of my favorites too, but it's not going to do particularly well where I live. You can't try to force something on a farming. It won't work. And so Howell Mountain Merlot is special because it's Mountain Merlot, and I don't own any, so I had to borrow.
Oh, it's fantastic. I'm glad you did, for sure.
Well, we might be having some of that brandy later on. I've got it in tanks, so.
Nice. Okay, cool. That's cool. Yeah.
Hold on, we're up to 3 bottles now. I'll send a label. I'll send a label.
Yeah, well, 2020 we'll have. So we actually distilled everything down to the varietals. So we kind of took the wine as it would have been in 2017, the Cab, the Rosé. Those were the two that were primarily affected in 2017.
Right.
And we distilled them. So they have this really interesting aura of like the varietal. Like, it smells like Cabernet. It smells like Rosé, and they're very unique and specific. And so this year, all of our red grapes were affected. So we have Merlot as its own unique designate. All we did was we produced our whites, but all of our reds were affected. So we're approaching them as separate wines and separate distillates.
So and you may not be able to mention, so I haven't seen any names or labels yet. I don't care about the labels, but is there a naming convention that you're kind of going with, or you don't want to share that yet?
Well, I will definitely put this out there to your viewership. If somebody can come up with the best name, they'll definitely, if they're the winner, get a bottle.
Oh, nice.
So we're willing to take submissions. But I think, one of the things that has been so interesting is I didn't expect to necessarily be talking about the product yet, because I didn't realize 2020 would come and present with all these fires. And so the reason we started talking about the project, even though we haven't released it, is because I do think it can help the industry, especially in a year of COVID where everybody has already been kicked in the face.
Everybody's screwed. Yeah. Right.
It's like, what happened next? I mean, my entire community is being decimated by the wildfires. And so I felt an obligation in a lot of respects to say, like, I might not have the solution for everyone, but I might be able to help. I mean, that's really why we started talking about it. And so we are in the development phases. I think we have some great ideas, but I definitely am open to hearing some, concepts, some support. We're good, but, crowdfunding and crowdsourcing helps too. So
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't want to. Hopefully, this isn't a good light, but so you mentioned it earlier, and I don't know the revenue percentages that are happening, in the valley and such from the tourist industry. I would imagine it is heavy, extremely heavy. I mean, obviously, if you're making wine, I mean, you're shipping, you're selling to other places. But what's the distribution of this stuff looking like for you guys? Like trying to get it out, right? So if I'm ordering from you, which is a great time, how can I buy your wine?
So you can actually buy our wine online. Obviously, because of the 3-tier system, we do sell through distributors and we do have placements throughout the country, but it's always easiest to go online, www.hoopesvineyard.com.
Mm-hmm.
And if you email any address at that website, you'll get me. So if you want to chat, give me a shout. I can be your phone a friend with wine advice, whatever it is.
Nice.
But I think, we would sell through our regular distribution channel, but we're going to have so little that it will probably be winery direct.
Yeah,
I mean,
gotcha.
one of the things that we're looking to is how can we potentially, if this smoked profile is extremely desirable in and of itself, there may be an opportunity for a secondary product, which is, like more of a repeatable project. So we'll have the Mother Nature indigenous rare version, and then hopefully maybe an annual version, because I think the quality is that interesting that we're hoping to create a product that, continues. And Scotch obviously is a smokehouse product. So maybe this can be too. So we'll see. And that one maybe will be more broadly distributed.
Well, I'm getting even more excited just hearing your story about, your international travels and being a Scotch fan, and then now saying how you can kind of see the similarities, or just how excited you are about it, just knowing that you have been tasting it along the way and just having that kind of background. It's exciting. I can't wait. Cal is pouring the rosé. So here we go.
Oh, sorry, I was busy. Man, I couldn't resist. I've got this,
busy doing man things. I love it.
Exactly. I get to stab things with this needle.
So this is made with cab from your site there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually the red wine that Cal has, the Hoopes Vineyard Oakville, it's the same wine, more or less, if you want to think of it that way, but just in 2 completely different styles.
Hey, that's exactly why Dan has the Merlot and I kept the cab and the rosé.
Typical. Nice.
And Cal?
So you mentioned garden. You didn't mention any meat. I don't know if you're a vegetarian or not. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking I'll take a lamb curry with some little, like a chutney kind of on the side, like a real spicy chutney. Some jasmine rice, and what else would go good with this would be like some kind of a cucumber dill salad kind of thing. I mean, that would really go well.
Nice.
Yeah, it has that really nice mid palate. It's round and bold.
No, this is not. So if you notice, people that weren't watching, so I used that the pen again to extract some wine without having to open it. I may share some of this with Dan if it makes it through the night. Probably I won't, because it won't make it through. But I guess my point is that, like, this is not the twist off top. There's nothing wrong with twist off tops. I don't mean that negative. But if you're going to the store and buying the the $10 rosé that you might mix with something, or you're going to pour it over ice. I mean, it definitely has a lot more body than that. I'm getting it is refreshing. I wouldn't necessarily call it light. So again, my reference earlier to a different wine, but this is this is a really nice rosé. I mean, it's take a case.
Oh boy.
Hey.
Yeah, crisp, good. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing not to like about this at all.
So it's definitely a red wine drinker's rosé. And, we're trying to push the boundaries on what people, expect from a product category. Most people don't realize you can make it from any grape. There aren't really any rules about how you make it. There are a couple ways you can make it. So this is made, like in many cases, it's actually a derivative of the red winemaking process. So as we're making the red wine, this is kind of what doesn't saturate with the color from the skins, but it's still the same wine. It just doesn't have that same saturation of color.
Nice.
How long does this sit? How long
Well,
is it in a barrel?
We don't barrel age it. So that's one of the differences. What we do is, color in wine comes from the skin and then comes from the barrel. And so the fermentation process for red wine takes about 7 to 11 days. And that's when the sugar obviously converts to alcohol. And we make dry wine. So that conversion happens as it's complete. And then we take the red wine and put it into barrel. But that whole time it stays with the grapes and the skin. Every day, the CO2 pushes the caps, the skin, to the top, and we have to punch them back down to make sure that the wine gets fully saturated. And this is the wine that essentially doesn't get fully saturated. It's like we bleed it off of the red wine. So in a lot of respects, it's the same wine. It just didn't get fully colored, if you want to think of it that way. But it still has that bold, beautiful Cabernet base, that mouthfeel, that kind of compelling red wine drinker's perspective, but lighter, fresher, because it doesn't end up spending that time in barrel and bringing it back together.
Yeah, a lot of good, like strawberry. If Campari wasn't bitter, I would want to say not Campari. I'm getting almost like this would be good in like a half and half and an Aperol spritz.
Well, how about a vermouth?
Well, okay. I'm glad that you finally went there because I've already asked for 3 bottles, and now I want to get into the vermouth. So I spent some time. I didn't spend some time. I took a couple of trips over to Europe, and I was in I don't know where I went, but I went to a couple places in Spain and Italy, and and probably as most people, right? I mean, you think of vermouth. I mean, if I mention vermouth, you're probably immediately thinking, oh no, she hung up on us. I definitely said the wrong thing, Dan.
Yeah, I think you did.
I've ruined it.
I would hang up too. I just don't know how.
Oh yeah, hold on, I can fix that. I can fix that for you.
You loving the rosé, huh? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's fantastic, man. I mean, it is. This is not a Bartles and James wine cooler. I can guarantee you that.
No, I bet. Yeah. I bet that's. She said it's made from the same grapes as the Cab. That's right, like side by side with those things. It's pretty interesting. You're drinking them side by side. You probably can get some similarities in terms of what you're getting on the palate there.
That's a good point.
Well,
I guess we didn't piss her off bad. She came back.
Hey, Mother Nature just, wants to keep throwing me curveballs. I don't know.
Yeah, it's the smoke is filling up the air. Hey, and sorry, we don't mean to keep you so long. So if you need to jump, we understand.
No, not at all. No, but vermouth. We were talking vermouth.
Well, we were. So I'd mentioned I'd already asked for 3 bottles of brandy, not the same ones. I mean, I'm thinking like I want to do a side by side comparison. But so yeah, again, Italy, Spain. And if I mention vermouth, and if you're a bourbon guy or a whiskey guy, or if you're a drinker, right, in the States, when I say vermouth, you're immediately going to a martini, a Manhattan. You're going down the road of it's. Maybe if you ventured out, you're going to, which is one of my favorite cocktails, a Negroni, and it doesn't have to be with gin. It could be with rum, or it could be Boulevardier, or multiple things, right? But you're always thinking, and before I went to Spain and Italy, I mean, to me, vermouth was a mixer, and nothing but a mixer. But I'll tell you what, go to Barcelona and walk into a bar, and they've got the little, the cool thing to do now is you get the white dog from somebody and you put it in the little charred barrel at your house, and you put some shit in there and do whatever kind of thing. It's like, I'm bottling my own stuff. Walk into any bar in Spain, and not Chili's or TGI Fridays, but that just traditional establishments. And every bar you walk into, they make their own vermouth. And, and it's like, and I think that's the reason that people aren't afraid to go to lunch and like have a drink, because they're drinking vermouth. I mean, but they're having a vermouth, right? I mean, with their, with their lunch, or they're having a vermouth before. And it's like, what'd you put in there? It's like, they may have put an orange wedge in there. They may have put olives in there. And it's like, hey, yeah, here's the vermouth on the rocks. And I really, really became a fan of, I didn't know, here's this thing. I didn't know that I was a vermouth fan until my first trip to Italy. And that's when I knew. I'm like, shit, I love a Negroni, but it's not the Negroni that I love. I love the vermouth.
But fantastic story. The one thing that I love about her story is just the fact that, she's second generation. It's not this, large conglomerate and the billionaire kind of thing. You and I, when we go to places like Napa, the one thing that we look for are people like Lindsay and her story, because we love that proprietor, the owner, the one that's been there forever, and they have that passion for it. They got lucky because they got to the right place or whatnot, but they're still doing it. They didn't sell out. And they're passionate about it. I love that whole story, and I love finding places like that. And there's nothing I admire more than that kind of vineyard right there.
And especially the success, right? And I mean, for me, like this makes me want to drink Hoopes wine, brandy, vermouth even more. And I'm joking about the, hey, can I get a bottle? Actually, I'm not joking, but I mean, like, this is stuff like we're not promoting stuff on here. I shouldn't say promoting. That's a bad word to use. We're not trying to review labels and brands just to review labels and brands. I mean, these are people that we want to connect with. I mean, think about some of the folks that we've had on, and these are not the big names. I mean, these are the people that are actually impacting a community and making a difference. And I think that's she said it best. Like, they've got their garden that they keep running year round. Yeah, that they serve. On the screw the name up.
But the Oasis,
Oasis, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, but those are the places that even before we started doing the show, Dan, I mean, those are the places that you and I sought out. Yeah. I mean, that's what we looked for. It's just now it's like, hey, when I go to Napa, where do I go? Well, the first place I'm going the next time I go to Napa is Hoopes Vineyard.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm ringing the damn doorbell, and I'm like, I'm not coming in until Lindsay shows up at the door.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
I'm not promoting that, so don't do that. That may not be the best way to end it.
No, definitely want to schedule first. But so one of the things we can get her back on, I want to get her back on another show, and we'll continue this discussion. We got so much more to cover that, we're trying to get through, the new thing with the brandy, and then you got into the vermouth, and definitely being a pioneer in terms of pivoting as an industry it's all fascinating, but there's so much more to Hoopes that I want to know about. Every day it seems like her life's a movie. Love this lifestyle.
Well, hey, so to the ringmaster, Kevin Bernardo. I was watching something earlier, and we always do a little bit of research on people. I shouldn't say a little bit, but I mean, we like to figure out who we're talking to, right? I mean, it's only fair because as big of a dipshit as I am, I want to try and approach this thing in like a decent manner. Yeah. And so we'd like to kind of catch up on people and see who they are and what have they done. And she's got, so there's a donkey out there in the vineyard. She's got all these little critters running around. I'm like,
why about them too?
I'm like, why does Bernardo not have these critters like wrangled up into the circus?
He could do a spot right there at
on premise at Hoopes.
Yes, that would be fun. I'm sure when the valley gets cranking back up again, they should definitely do the Bernardo Circus at Hoopes. That would be kind of cool to see.
I hope we get a ticket.
I hope we get a ticket too. But no, I mean, her fascinating story. I mean, we just touched the surface of it. I hope she comes back on. It's that story of her growing up in Napa. Back in the 80s or whatnot, and
not wanting to be there.
It's not untold. There's several people in the valley that have a similar story, but I love it every time because they get drawn back in. And you and I know we've talked about this enough to where we're like, okay, how close do you want to get to something that's romantic before you make it, non-romantic in terms of being a career or whatever it is. But it sounds like, with her story that she probably got some of that, right? And of course, right now she's probably living it with the smoke stuff or whatnot. But it still sounds so fun in terms of her lifestyle, and we love those stories for sure.
Yeah. How do I get the room with the windmill out back overlooking the vineyard?
Mm-hmm.
I don't need the baby. Don't need the baby.
No.
But I do need some of that brandy. I got to think about the last time I've had, which, I mean, so if you think about brandy, I mean, it is cognac, right? I mean, it's like champagne and sparkling wine.
Yep.
I mean, the only reason sparkling wine is because it's not from the Champagne region of France and you can't call it champagne. The only reason brandy is because it's not from the cognac region and you can't call it cognac. I mean, it's like bourbon. It's the same label, same design. It's the same stuff. And oftentimes, I mean, I guess you kind of get hooked on with some biases of, hey, this is my, I'm only drinking this. But, again, so I know it's called Birdies and Bourbon. And, I when I'm reaching out, Dan, or people are reaching out to me and they're like, hey, I know it's bourbon, but we're a winery. Would you be interested in having us on your show? And I'm like, don't let the bourbon fool you.
Right.
I mean, that's alcohol. Right. And it's just, it sounded catchy. And, we thought, okay, well, we'll go with that. But that's the thing is, I guess the point of the, where I'm trying to get to is, really there are so many good juices, be it wine, whiskey, bourbon, gins. I'm not a big vodka drinker. If I'm drinking vodka, I'm drinking Hope Springs Distillery. But, I mean, outside of that, there are so many different people that are making good juice these days. I mean, don't be closed-minded to, I'm not drinking a brandy from Napa because that's not where brandy comes from. And they're known for their wine. Yeah. Well, guess what? They are known for their wine. And as Lindsay mentioned, it's the quality of the product that's going in. And just because there was an exception that happened to that harvest doesn't mean that the product still isn't quality and it can't be turned into something. It's salvageable, and it's more than salvageable. I just can't produce the same premium wine that I was producing. I'm now going to turn it into a different spirit that fits my flavor profile, and hopefully that measures up with what our fan base drinks.
I'll tell you my fantasy and my. I'm just going to paint a picture for you in terms of what I see happening here. Okay, this is I'm foreshadowing. Okay,
I'd love to hear that.
All right, so September 2021.
Ooh.
Hold on. Don't interrupt me. Sunday, 6 p.m. Pacific time. Dan's One and Done wins the Safeway Open.
Well, hold on. Are we actually in Napa watching it happen?
Well, hold on. So Dan's One and Done wins the Safeway Open.
Ooh.
And we're there, and then we'll head on back to Hoopes, and we'll celebrate with some this brandy.
Oh, we're gonna have some brandy. We're gonna have some curry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, maybe not curry.
And that meal that she was talking about. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Fresh garden, little rosé.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, a little rosé to top off that spiciness.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, let me just tell you, you may not see Dan for the rest of the night after that spicy dish.
Oh boy, that's a good point. That's a good point. All right, let's wrap this one up, buddy. That was fun. I think she'll come back on. We can touch on some of those other subjects in terms of more of the history on how they got started. I know she touched on a little bit, but I want to hear more of that story, and some of the challenges they had and how they overcame them in terms of a vineyard and getting into production after farming for so long and that kind of stuff. Because it's such fascinating, it's really good stuff. So yeah, they got some good insight there.
Yeah, Lindsay, if you're still listening to the show, it's 3 bottles of brandy, and I'll take all the vermouth you've got. I would love to do a show exclusively on vermouth and do a vermouth tasting with you. That'd make my year.
Mine too.
Make my year.
Mine too. All right.
Well, here's to thanks to Hoopes Vineyard for coming on.
Cheers.
Cheers.